On this day in history, the 10th of March, 1629, King Charles I dissolves Parliament and decides that he can rule by himself for the next 11 years, completely unchecked, and this period becomes known as the Personal Rule. So basically, Charlie I's been king for about 4 years and he's doing a bit of a shit job. His foreign policy didn't make a whole lot of sense, the war with Spain was not going well and it was costing a fortune, his religious ideals didn't align with Parliament's, or most people's for that matter, and he'd been spending like a baller. So now he's skidding. Eventually he gets sick of being criticised and held to account by Parliament because divine right of kings, and says, "See you soon," to his ministers and shuts down Parliament. They didn't really mind, they'd already voted for an adjournment. For the next 11 years he rules with absolute power. He's advised by a small council that he appoints himself. Problems start pretty early on, and the biggest one being Charlie Boy's cash flow problem. He can't afford to run a country. Only Parliament can tax people due to the Petition of Rights, so he can't get money that way. He does make some economies, he makes his household smaller, he stops his pissing contest with France and Spain, and he does sell some royal land. But he also gets money from his nobles by selling the rights to monopolies, which is illegal, and by extending the royal forests, so now he can fine and charge land owners because they woke up one morning and the boundary had changed. He also brought back a brilliantly named law, the Distraint of Knighthood, which hadn't been in effect for 100 years, but fuck it, I'm the king. This law required every man who earned over £40 a year from land to present himself at the king's coronation to be knighted, so he fined everyone that didn't show. His biggest money grab came in the form of ship money, a tax imposed on coastal and port towns that's supposed to pay for the upkeep of the Royal Navy. Not your massive war debt, Charlie. This policy obviously proves incredibly unpopular and people just don't pay. In 1637, a man named John Hampden was taken to court for failure to pay. He is prosecuted, but only 7 of the 12 royal judges agree that he should have paid. They're the king's mates. He also became even more of a religious zealot and went as far as to start cutting people's ears off. These 3 guys. Just because they published a pamphlet that he didn't like, which is a bit too far. He tried his reforms in Scotland, but they went, nah bam, and started the Bishops' War. King Charles couldn't afford this war and was forced in 1640 to call a short parliament so they could raise the funds and pay the army. A few days later he did dissolve it again, but not for long, and soon Parliament was back proper. And they all lived happily ever after. For 2 years.